Well, hello. Thank you for watching today's training video. My name is Rita Peterson and I'm the Wellness Coordinator for Northside Independent School District.
Hi, and I'm Rosie. I'm a dietetics student here at the University of Texas in San Antonio. Today, we're going to be going over MyPlate and Healthy Meals on a Budget, Lessons 1 and 8. This is brought to you from Building a Healthy Temple Nutrition Curriculum and is partnered with the San Antonio Food Bank.
Well, just as Rosie said, we're going to be talking a little bit about MyPlate. Use MyPlate as a resource for recipes, for education. The United States Department of Agriculture developed the food guide in order to show us how we can eat healthier for not only ourselves but our families as well. So one of the things with MyPlate is it breaks it up into 5 food groups. One of the food groups is our fruit group. We have a vegetable group. We have our protein group. We also have dairy. And we also have grains. So in the recipe that we're doing today, we're actually using quite a few of those food groups, and we're going to be looking at that in just a minute. But they encourage us to use as many colors as possible. And if you can see, we've got a lot of color in this recipe. So our fruits and vegetables are going to be providing phytochemicals and vitamins that we need in order to prevent chronic illness. So one of them is we're going to be using is mushrooms. We're going to be using broccoli. We're going to be using sweet red peppers, tomatoes that offer lycopene. We're also using zucchini, garlic, and onions. For our protein, we're going to be using chicken, which is one of our lean proteins. We're also going to be using whole grain pasta, and we'll talk a little bit more about why we want to use whole grain pastas. And then we're also going to be using some cheese, which is going to serve as our dairy food group. One of the other things about this recipe is that it's something that the entire family can participate in. So Rosie and I are going to tell you a little bit about why it's important to include our families in our recipes, because a lot of times if they participate in preparing the meal, they're going to want to try what they prepared. So that's always a good tip when we're talking about MyPlate.
One of the most important things to focus on when making meals on a budget is the 3 Ps. Now that's going to be plan, purchasing, and preparing.
Planning is part of eating healthy on a budget. When we plan, we spend less. One of the ways that I plan for my family is I definitely look at the store ads and the coupons that I get in the mail and plan accordingly as well. So maybe chicken's on sale, so I'm probably going to have a little bit more chicken in my recipes for the week.
Yes.
Another part of your curriculum is purchasing. Yeah. And one tip that I use when I purchase is when you're shopping in the store, make sure that you shop the perimeter of the store. Those are going to be your proteins,
your fresh fruits and veggies,
dairy, yeah, thank
eggs.
you. Yeah, your dairy and your eggs, all of that is going to be the perimeter. Pay attention to that food label because that makes a big difference. If one of the first 3 ingredients on that food label is sugar, or it ends in a word that sounds like gross, like sucrose, fructose, dextrose, anything that rhymes with gross is a hidden sugar. When looking at the food label, there are several things that we need to take note of. The first one is serving size. When we look at serving size, this tells us how many servings are in that particular item. So for example, a bag of chips might not be 1 serving. If it says 5 servings or servings per container, that means that should serve 5 individual servings. The second section is calories. The calories that are indicated are per serving. So for example, back to the bag of chips. If it's 100 calories per serving and I ate the entire bag of 5 servings, I've just consumed 500 calories. So really important to keep note of how many servings and how many calories per serving are in your food item. Another tip to remember is that if a food is fat-free, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's calorie-free. So those calories can add up really quickly if you're assuming that that item is fat-free and calorie-free. Another thing to take note of on a food label is limiting certain nutrients. Eating too much of total fat can be very detrimental to your health, such as cholesterol, sodium. Those particular things can increase your risk for chronic disease such as heart disease, cancers, and even high blood pressure. So on the right-hand side, you'll see a percent daily value. That's going to be based on 100% per day.
One of the limiting nutrients in regards to total fat is going to be trans fats. One thing to be aware of is that if an item is marked as trans fat free, just to be aware of how many servings you are consuming, because anything under 0.5 grams is okay to be placed as trans fat free on the label. Another point is to get enough of these nutrients. You want to look for dietary fiber, vitamin A, vitamin C, calcium, iron, all your vitamins and minerals. Most often than not, Americans aren't getting enough of these, and it's leading to an increase in chronic diseases. Another point that you want to look at is a percent daily value. These are based off of 2,000 calorie diets, and pretty much it's telling you how much of the percentage you should be consuming for the day. So for example, if you're eating an item that has 4% vitamin A, well then you still need 96% for the remaining day. The last tip that you want to look at is the footnote with daily values. This provides more information on the daily values for important nutrients, including fats, sodium, and fiber. The daily values are listed for people who eat 2,000 or 2,500 calories each day. So as Rita mentioned, we are going to be using a couple of the groups from MyPlate. The recipe we're doing today is whole wheat spaghetti. So whole wheat pasta, we're going to boil the water and pour it in. There we go. So, whole wheat pasta, the difference between whole grain and enriched is that whole grain actually has more fiber. So in refined grains, the germ and the bran are removed, and that is where all the fiber, B vitamins, and iron are found. So fiber is also found in vegetables, and that's what helps with digestive system, helps lower the risk of cardiovascular disease, and
Helps you feel fuller too, right, Rosie?
yes, it does.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So then what we're going to do is just have the pasta boil, get that ready, and you can go ahead and start chopping up the vegetables, getting everything ready.
One of the things also with MyPlate is that it encourages the more color, the better. Every color offers something different, so different vitamins. So for example, like I mentioned earlier, the red color fruits and vegetables offer an antioxidant called lycopene, which specifically targets the heart. So I like to say I'm a very simple person that likes very simple things to remember. So I always remember red goes to the heart, Valentine's Day. So red specifically targets the heart. Rosie was talking about how some vegetables cook faster than others. So for example, of these vegetables, which vegetables would I be cooking first, Rosie?
Well, Rita, what you want to do is stick to the thicker, more dense vegetables. So broccoli can definitely go first because it would take a little bit longer to cook. And you definitely want to end with the bell peppers and the mushrooms, which are a little more sensitive. So once you actually have your vegetables all chopped up and ready to go, you'd want to heat up your pan and add some olive oil to it. And we are going to add onion and garlic, so that way you can get a nice little flavor.
Not to mention smell.
Yes, definitely. And then today for our recipe, our protein of choice, as mentioned, is going to be chicken. We are using lean chicken right now, which just definitely has its pros. It is not a red meat, and because it's so thin, it actually cooks a lot quicker.
We're going to cook these, cook the garlic and the onions just until they start to brown. Like we mentioned earlier, if there's a vegetable that you have at home, maybe you have cauliflower instead of broccoli, you can always substitute another vegetable for for something else. Maybe my family doesn't like mushrooms. I can put something else. Maybe they like yellow squash instead of zucchini, and I can throw in some yellow squash. So this recipe is fantastic because you can definitely add or subtract some veggies that you like or dislike.
Definitely. So what you're going to want to do with your chicken, pretty much we're just going to slice it and dice it and get it ready to cook. One important thing about meat, especially chicken, when you're cooking it, is that you're going to want to cook it until it's to 165 degrees. That is actually when salmonella starts to die off. And then whenever, let's say you bought it a couple of days ago and you put it in the freezer, well, when it comes to defrosting, a lot of people like to just leave it overnight outside so that way it can defrost. You don't want to do that. According to the USDA, there is such thing as a danger zone, which is a temperature range of 40 degrees Fahrenheit all the way to 140. In between there is when there's an increase in bacterial overgrowth, and when you cook it, the chances of salmonella occurring is very high. So ways to avoid that are to just take it from the freezer, leave it in the refrigerator, and it will defrost.
In this lesson also, we're talking a little bit about eating healthy on a budget, and a lot of us are on budgets. So me included. Rosie, are you on a budget as a college student?
Most definitely.
Well, I've got a son in college and a daughter in high school, so definitely on a budget here.
Good. So then once you put the chicken in the pan, you're also free to add some seasonings to it. I personally am a very big fan of pepper. If you are going to add salt, that's okay, but you just want to make sure not to pour too much. As mentioned, we are trying to, most Americans already consume enough sodium, more than enough sodium. So you just want to make sure to push for other seasonings, ones that are low in sodium. Now, in a normal setting, whenever you're cooking for other people or even just for yourself, you want to avoid artificial nails, and you also want to avoid having jewelry, so any rings or bracelets. The reason being is because if you're cooking a raw meat such as chicken, the likelihood of you going over it or cutting, it might contaminate and you can get the bacteria on there. And when you're touching other items such as vegetables or anything like that, you can cross-contaminate as well. It's also important to remember that whenever you are cutting or dealing with any sort of raw meat, that you wash your hands after, so that you don't have that raw chicken peel on everything and every surface that you touch, especially the vegetables.
I'm going to add a little bit of salt and pepper now.
Perfect. Okay, so when the pasta is done, you want to go for it being al dente. So that just helps the pasta have a little more of a bite to it instead of the noodles being mushy. Another thing is that once the pasta is cooked, you are going to drain the water. Because the water is so hot, it's boiling and produces steam, whenever you're pouring it, you want to pour it away from your body. So that way when the steam rises, it doesn't hit you or burn you or anything like that.
So once we have our chicken nice and cooked, we can start adding some of those tougher vegetables like Rosie mentioned earlier. So the first one we would probably want to grab is our broccoli. Throw in some of that broccoli.
Yes.
How about the peppers, Rosie? Would that be good next, or?
I would try to add more of the zucchini first.
Zucchini, okay.
Yes, ma'am. Just so that we can get that. These take a little bit longer than the peppers would.
Awesome.
I personally like zucchini halves, but you're more than welcome to dice them up so that way they can cook a little bit faster as well. And you also just want to keep an eye out on your chicken. If you cut out smaller pieces where it's a little more difficult to take a temperature, you don't have a thermometer on hand, what you can do is just check the middle. You can cut it in the middle and just to see if it's pink. If there's no pink, you might just want to leave it on there a little longer just to be sure, and then the chicken will be good to go. Currently, MyPlate does recommend, there are differences in age and gender on how much vegetables you should be consuming. However, a good range would be 2 to 3 cups a day.
And veggies are a little bit more, you're allowed a little bit, or recommended a little bit more than your fruits because of the sugar. So our vegetables are low fat, low calorie, Most of them are not starchy. So you've got some a little bit more benefits on that. Is that right, Rosie?
Yes, vegetables do also have fiber, as we mentioned, so it helps with your digestive issue, any digestive issues. It helps keep you fuller longer while consuming less calories.
Should I grab the
Yes,
peppers
ma'am.
next? You can start seeing how beautiful your pan is starting to look. More
It is very
color.
colorful.
Eat a rainbow. I know on MyPlate they've got a great resources for the kids that you can have color sheets, you can have worksheets, little games. They even have games on there, and you'll see a lot of Eat a Rainbow. So.
Yes. One other thing to consider, there are, is to do small everyday changes. For example, it's very difficult to go from eating your everyday meals to just switching to increasing a lot of fruits and vegetables or whole grains. So it's very important to take small steps. One way is if you eat sandwiches on a daily basis, instead of buying white bread, just go for the whole grain. Try that. Just as Rita mentioned, if you're going to have eggs for breakfast, try adding some peppers or mushrooms just to get that into that habit of increasing your vegetable intake.
I know for my family, one of the ways I introduced whole grain was I did half and half. So I did half whole grain and half regular pasta, and it was kind of an easier transition than just going full. And then you don't want to waste. That's my biggest thing is I never want to waste food. So going half and half was a lot easier on them.
Again, if you do have a thermometer accessible, you do want to temp the chicken into the thickest part, depending on how you cut it, to see if it is at 165 degrees, okay? And then one other thing you can do is just cut it in the middle and see if there's no pink.
We could grab one if we want.
Yes.
And just look at that. And it is totally not pink.
Yes. So another thing to keep in mind when purchasing canned foods is that you would want to rinse them a total of 3 times. That's the magic number. So that way you can get rid of half the sodium in them. Another thing that you can do with canned beans is if you wanted to substitute the chicken in this meal, you could use beans as the protein, and it can actually be a lot more time efficient and cost efficient if needed.
You can also substitute if I maybe had an extra batch of beef with another recipe and I have extra, you can substitute that chicken for beef as well. You can even do a meatless meal and do, in addition to the beans, you could do maybe a tofu. So once everything is ready, we're going to just add that over to our pasta. Look how pretty that is. It's like so many colors.
Definitely like all the colors.
We're eating a rainbow with this one.
And so once you've mixed the noodles with the chicken, you definitely want to top it off with some mozzarella to get that dairy that we talked about earlier. Here you go. Okay, and then you just want to stir it in. The cheese will melt considering that everything is still pretty warm. And then you'll be good to go. And then to top it off, you do also want to add some basil leaves as a good seasoning. The basil is an herb and it definitely has a really nice flavor. As Rita mentioned, half a cup of cooked pasta is considered to be 1 ounce of whole grains. The recommended amount ranges between 6 to 8 ounces per day. Thank you for watching our video today. We hope you enjoy the recipe.